The Return of the Sith =RK equals Phase 2 From the Darkness =RK equals Part 1. Mother Machine Chamber. Belsavis. My time was up. I could feel it in my bones. Combat stimulants and alchemy concoctions flooded my bloodstream, yet the little physical strength I had left waned by the minute. The force sustained my crumbling body, yet its very brush was killing me. Now all I had left was to lay down a few last contingencies and throw the dice. Admiral Holt, you've got the code words. If IoT contacts you without the proper authorization, then you've got your orders too. I spoke over the comm with Freedom's flag bridge. If someone leaves this facility without clearing it with you first, you've got your orders. I repeated. Understood. Joanna confirmed. I knew there was a spark of excitement in her eyes. Her heart beat faster in anticipation. She loved the chance I might be giving her. Hated it too, with all her heart. If the contingency goes into effect, then you've got options. I won't order you what to do if I'm gone. Then command goes to you. All I ask is that you relieve and secure Mandalore before returning home. Corellia and the Republic could use all the allies they could get, and my people are among the few useful ones you have. I rasped. I'll take it under advisement. Joanna, for what's worth, I'm sorry. I know. A soft sigh came over the comm. You would do it again if the situation calls for it. Yes. I hate you, sir. I love you too. Try not to die. Just die and get it over with? My lips twitched in amusement. That would make my life much easier. The nasty Sith who is to blame for everything is dead. Much less paperwork then. It's in the regulations. Joanna hummed. I bet it is. May the Force serve you well, Joanna. Veil over and out. I cut the channel. You can leave the chamber. The side effects of what I'm about to do might be hazardous. That's negative, sir. We'll be all right. The clone in charge of the security detail in the room shook his head. You didn't let us to the madness at Camino, General. We aren't leaving you now. Thank you, Lieutenant. Prepare the prisoner and stand back. I ordered and stood up on swaying legs. Even if everything went to hell, at least I could console myself that I would go out surrounded by people loyal to me, not bound by simple fear or a greater cause. Time was up indeed. I dragged myself to the machine. It was still gulping all the energy a CR-90 frigate landed outside could supply, yet there was no sign it was going to be active anytime soon. Criff my luck. I stumbled to the gurney where T was strapped in and kept under sedation by enough medicine to outright kill at least couple of squads of my best clones. The amount of sedatives needed to keep her under had been increasing daily and would soon had reached a point where it would have to be either cut off or she would die. Even a Jedi Master couldn't survive with more drugs than blood in their bloodstream. For a prolonged period of time anyway. We tested that on Korriban back in the day when a bunch of captured Jedi were shipped to us for some fun and games. I looked at T's sleeping form. She was at ease. Peaceful. Damn it, this was going to be such a waste. T was looking almost like a Shara when she was in a deep slumber. It wasn't like it would have worked between us in the long term. There was great chemistry, true. We didn't have much in common, that was true too. We were likely to end up on the wrong side of a conflict anyway, another truth. I had no illusions that T would compromise her principles just because of me, and my plans for the Jedi would have destroyed the Order in the form in which it existed before the coup. I needed them as weapons. T on the other hand would have fought that. She would have wanted to give them all a choice at the very least, and that wasn't something I could have allowed. In the end the Jedi would have been either firmly on my side or removed as a complication. A rasp escaped my lips. I was wasting time. It wasn't like I needed to justify myself to this woman, even if what I was about to do might consign her to a fate worse than death. I raised my arms and let the force flow through me. Its gentle breeze lit my frayed nerves on fire, and I had to bite my lips not to howl. My will stretched around me, encompassing the power burning me from within. An artifact I crafted with Zash for her own transfer within Kiera's body arose from its container, which was brought in earlier from my quarters, and flew until it was between me and T. It was a small thing, a pyramid which it could comfortably fit in the palms of my hands. The artifact began to glow with power absorbed from the force surrounding me. Its red sides lit up with glowing alchemy symbols. I focused my will and intent upon it and channeled as much force as I could within it. My body began to break down faster, but it didn't matter by this point. My awareness stretched further until it touched T's slumbering mind. Her awareness suddenly flared up. Our minds touched and she tried to pull back in surprise. Veil? What? No. Her mental screams echoed for those who could hear them. I will not allow this. I won't be your puppet. Anyone's puppet. T snarled. Do you think I'm going to give you a choice, T? The artifact pulsed with power. When the Jedi Master tried to lash at me with the Force, it greedily drank every bit of energy she threw at me even as it continued to drain me dry. Shark T recoiled in horrified comprehension. She tried to raise her mental barriers to keep me away, only for them to shatter at my approach. The jagged pieces were sucked in by the artifact too. The Force pulsed around us and my construct consumed its fill. I pressed on. My mind touched the artifact and it eagerly accepted me. I focused its power and forcefully established a channel between the core of who I was and Shark T. This was no mere force connection but a solid tunnel of raw power connecting our very souls. T screamed. She clawed at me as my mind violated everything she ever was. I could experience her memories. I knew her better than she knew herself. She was a woman I could admire. While she could even follow the path I charted if she believed it to be the right one, her convictions were unshakable pillars. Even Camino didn't change that. The dark side could break her. It could destroy the person T was. However, it couldn't make her bend her morals. That's when I knew for sure. T and me, we could never walk the same path for long. I was a monster of my own making. Sooner or later T would have stood against me when I went farther than her principles allowed. My respect for her raised even further. Shark T knew she lost. Her mind, her soul, was bared open for me. Yet she fought so I wouldn't use her body to spread my brand of insanity across the galaxy. I pressed harder. T howled as her mind began cracking. The Force thundered around us. It pulsed in tandem with T's futile struggles. T's mind was unraveling. I pressed harder and began replacing her. The tunnel connecting us twisted. My artifact screamed when something began siphoning the Force out of it. My very being was tugged just as I was enmeshing with T and about to enter. The tug became a pull, then a wrench which sent me flying back through the tunnel. T let one last scream and I could feel her empty body dying as not only the Force but its life itself was drained from it as my artifact attempted to serve its purpose and maintain the channel. I was shoved back into my body. The tunnel flaked off and was consumed. My artifact glowed with the light of the Force itself before growing dim and clattering on the floor. I followed it on the ground a moment later. My chest hurt, my lungs screamed for air. It all paled in comparison to feeling every cell in my body agonizingly slowly cannibalizing itself as my very life fueled the Force trying to keep me alive. The same Force that was tortuously slowly immolating me from within. My body couldn't live anymore without the Force sustaining it, yet its very touch was killing me. Emperor's balls, what the crap happened? My mind was a jumble of memories, mine and T's. They were clashing in my head, making it pound as if a Gamorrean was beating inside with a warhammer. There wasn't Chemval to interrupt the ritual. T was unable to fight me off. That was the primary use of the artifact and it worked. What or who interfered? Part 2 =RK Mother Machine Chamber. Belsavis. Awareness came back instantly and completely as it was her nature. Ashar drank greedily from the fountain of energy linked up to her systems. Raw power and the Force, that's what she needed in order to operate, to exist. For a time that felt like blissful eternity, Ashar simply felt and enjoyed her meal. The autonomous repair systems chugged along fixing the extensive damage. Even with the liberal power she was fed, it was going to be a long time before she could be fully operational. Ashar frowned. She had so much to do, yet she had to wait. Again. She sighed in resignation. Her senses came back online after all self-diagnostics deemed them sufficiently repaired and she examined her home. Armored people, check. Alive armed and armored people. She panicked. Her defenses weren't simply offline, they would need to largely be rebuilt. Ashar didn't want to be taken offline again. She enjoyed being awake. Preferably when she could tinker too. Having no other option, she called for help through the Force. Hopefully someone would answer and she could make a deal. Once fully repaired, Ashar could be very useful. Quite well protected too, though considering what happened the last time, she decided that a lot more and improved defenses were needed. It's your fault. Someone rasped. The same statement pulsed through the force and came on the wings of agony Asha could actually feel. It was glorious. It hurt. She didn't really like it. Stop that, Asha exclaimed. Huh? She knew that signature. Vale, you're back like you promised, Asha exclaimed. You're late. She consulted her inbuilt clock. Very late. There was an accident. Came the answer. More pain. Asha recoiled. I need my body fixed. Now. Her senses finally locked on a figure laying on the ground. It was in a bad shape. Did he forego maintenance for all this time? Ugh, biological entities. They had no sense. You appear damaged. Do you need repairs? Asha asked, while checking up the status of her fabrication units. Gone, wrecked, useful for spare parts, being slowly fixed. She correlated the last one with the scans she could get of Vale. Nope. He was a breathing and talking corpse. What do you think, Asha? The Sith grunted. Even more pain. Asha flinched. Nope, she didn't like that. I think you need immediate repairs. I'm not yet operational. Redirect all power to unit you used to rebuild me last time. The human gasped for air. Pain. It was to be avoided. Asha checked again. The numbers weren't working. Damage nominal. Fabrication Unit 4 unable to fix it before expiration. Asha asked reluctantly. She focused on the armored people. They didn't look like they found her answer acceptable. She didn't want to be taken offline again. Think. I need a new body then. Can you maintain my mind until it's ready? It hurt to listen. The force coming from Vale burned her every time he spoke. Asha ran the numbers anyway. Negative. Damage too severe. Maintaining additional mental construct until replication of enhanced body impossible. Enhanced? The Sith asked. Asha whimpered as the pain suddenly surged. Do you have scans of my original body? Recreating it using what material is available to speed up the process might do the trick. She screamed in pain. The armed men were pointing weapons at her. Materials? Asha wanted to continue to operate. One fresh body, one falling apart, a lot of ancient ones. She could work with that. Asha focused her sensors on the armed men. She had to move to the fabrication unit. I'll begin gathering resources. You heard the nice lady. Help me up. Arg. Vale's voice broke at the end and a quiet whine came from his lips. Asha's world was engulfed in agony. Asha equals. The pain got too much. I blacked out and dreamed. The world was twisted, like I was seeing it through murky waterfall. I was drifting through space among a shoal of brown and black spotted creatures which resembled whales, if those mammals had that many large fins hugging their sides. Smaller, rough-looking beings flew around like groups of demented fish. The scene shifted. 3 moon-sized construct drifted above the lush green world. They resembled a weird model of thick spiral galaxies. If you replaced the arms with slowly drifting tentacles, they were dull yellow, almost brown, a shade that made them appear sick. Around them flew large cylinders covered by slabs or rock-like armor. I was standing upon war-ravaged streets where warriors wearing organic-looking armor clashed into rows of massive war droids. Light blast of fire harmlessly splashed over bone-like substance. Vicious-looking staffs went through shields as if they weren't there only to clash into slabs of vehicle-grade armor. The staffs pulsed and acid splashed from 100 hungry mouths. The air rippled, gravity shifted and the whole street around me was crushed into sand. When the dust settled, I was in the middle of a long corridor facing 2 figures wearing advanced-looking armor. They produced lightsabers, red and purple, then moved to flank me. I raised my own blade to meet them and I was somewhere else. I was leaning over a crib where a toddler was giggling and waving at me. Wisps of silky blonde hair framed her tiny face and her sapphire eyes bored in my own. A flash of light illuminated us from a nearby window and the room shook with the thunder of distant explosion. The door behind me disintegrated, sending lethal shrapnel scything through the room. The window promptly followed suit and grenades flew in. Armored figures stormed in and my vision vanished in the merciless glare of blaster fire. I stood on top of the Senate building and coruscant burned around me. Figures wielding lightsabers in all colors of the rainbow faced each other and clashed before the world ended in orbital fire. The scene shifted again, and again and again. From the darkness, equals RK equals. Part 3. Mother Machine Chamber. Bell Savis. My disjointed dreams shimmered for a long time before the visions tapered off and I was left into blessed slumber. Eventually I became aware again. It was a slow process through which I had to fight drowsiness every step of the way. It took me some time to become coherent enough to notice the force. It was all around me. It was both light and dark. It caressed my nerves like a warm summer rain. My heart beat with joy at the soft touch of my power. I gathered around me like a blanket and drowsed off into a healing trance. The next time I awoke, I felt normal. There was no trace of the exhaustion pressing upon me the last time and my mind was clear. The force shimmered around me under my guidance, forming a barrier between whatever surrounded me and myself. Only then I allowed my mind to expand and feel who was around. There were 20 clones in quite large if cluttered space, with a lot more in the complex surrounding me. I could feel my touch upon their minds. They were mine through and through. There was just one question whose answer escaped me. Who the crap was I? That thought opened the proverbial floodgates and my mind was flooded by memories. My half-forgotten life on a primitive world called Earth. My first death. The deal I made. I remembered awakening as Delcatar Vale, an officer of the Eurasian Federation in a different world. I remember struggling to keep my mind mine while fragmented memories of a dead man. My first taste of war threatened to claim my sense of self. I fought. I made friends. I fell in love. I died. Again. I was offered another deal and jumped in without figuring out all the strings attached. I remembered another life. One of slavery and pain. I recalled my first conscious taste of the Force. The screams of my master were oh so sweet. I was found by a Sith who dragged me to Korriban. I remembered the academy. My training to become an expendable weapon while Coruscant was sacked. I remember the peace between the Republic and the Sith Empire which saved and damned me in the same time. I had a choice. It was a simple one, yet its consequences changed the galaxy. They continue to do so to this day. I could have killed myself. I could have attempted to run. The consequences for failing either of those didn't bear thinking about, but I could have done it. Instead I chose to stay. For the love of a woman in a different universe. For a chance to protect a world I chose as my home. For the strength never again to be weak. For the power to forge my own path. I remember choosing to become a monster. I remember the trap I fell into. The Eurasian Federation, its Earth which is the one I would call home if I'm asked to choose between it and the world upon which I was born so long ago. Natal. I could barely remember them. If someone asked me today if I would return, I didn't know the answer. I remember my service to the Empire. Both the bad and the good. The friends I made and the 2 women who kept me reasonably sane. The enemies who I either crushed or subverted. The decades of conflict. It all ended in a flash of light above Korriban. I remember being raised in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. I remember Master Yoda as my favorite grandfather figure in my youth. I remember the friends I was trained with before I got chosen by a Jedi as their Padawan. I remember my master. I remember how proud I was when I earned the title of Jedi Knight. I remember my failures. All of the Padawans I trained were dead. I remember Geonosis, where the Clone Wars began. So many good people perished there. So many more followed as the conflict took a life of its own. I remember meeting a real Sith for the first time. It was exciting and scary. It was surprising. Vale was different. I remember him shattering all my preconceptions. He changed the way I saw the world. He deceived me. He seduced and betrayed me. I remember my fury and shame. How my eyes were opened for the way the Sith toyed with me and over a slippery slope that ended with me betraying the Jedi Order. I remember how naive I turned out to be. I remember when the whole galaxy was swallowed by the dark side. I remember hundreds of my friends blaze through the Force as they died. Master Yoda, Plo Koon and so many others. I remember facing Vale on Kamino. I remember his fury. Even half crazed with hatred and anger he crushed Rancysis. We fought. The Force guided me. I was astounded when I cut off his hand. Yet I lost. I remember cutting my own hand. I could recall the shock kicking the fury out of me. I could see myself on the rain-soaked platform. We fought. I won/lost. I remember Kamino scream and die. I remember the Force itself, how in pain as a wound was torn into it. I remembered the madness. I caused it. I ended it. I broke a whole fleet so I could bind them to myself. It was a necessary act. It was a crime that I could never forgive. Who am I? I couldn't even recall my original name. Am I Delcatar Vale, officer of the Eurasian Federation? A pilot who was an Oni operative? Was I the slave I could remember? Lord Vale, the Dark Lord of the Sith? Shark T, the Jedi Master? Who am I? A monster, a Sith? A Guardian, a Jedi? Who am I? The Force sensed my distress. It could hear my question even if confused it. The dark side was overjoyed by the prospect of more conflict. The light was content that I might walk a way that ends with the destruction of both the Jedi and Sith. Who am I? My mind screamed through the Force. My awareness expanded. I could perceive all my memories. I could see when one person ended and changed into another. The officer was turned into a slave, the slave into an acolyte, and the acolyte into a Sith. Delcatar Vale, Lord Vale. He was the most important. He was the one who eventually made a choice with his eyes wide open and all the relevant information. Vale chose the Empire. It was his new home. His future. That's who I used to be. Yet my home was gone. My future, hijacked. I was Delcatar Vale. A soldier, general. A Sith. A Mandalorian. Mandalore. I made a choice too. A Wi-Fi failed. A home under siege. A galaxy set on fire. The Force listened. Something stirred at the back of my mind. The Force heard my decision, accepted it and acted. My being felt a subdued light pulsing within me. If I was Delcatar Vale, then I couldn't be Shark T. Shattered pieces were bathed by the soothing light of the Force. I could hear a relieved sigh. Vale, what in the name of the Force did you do? A female voice screamed in my mind. This wasn't the dark side trying to influence me once again. Not, this was the Force criffing with me. My eyes snapped open in shock. T? I exclaimed aloud. Of all the Emperor damned. What did you do? Shark T snarled from within my mind. I'm Delcatar Vale, the Dark Lord of the Sith, and I have a Jedi stuck inside my head. Again. Damn it, Force. Part 4, =RK=, Mother Machine Chamber, Belsavis, Ashar, good work. I congratulated the Mother Machine after I got myself out of her biofab module. I'm still waiting for you to fulfill your part of the bargain, Ashar grumbled. You're getting fixed first. Unfortunately, I won't be able to keep that frigate supplying you with energy for much longer. You'll have to do with the portable generators until I could find a better solution. You're stalling, Ashar grumbled. Vale, answer me. T continued to ramble and I continued ignoring her with hard-earned practice. There's another war going on. If I'm to live up to my side of our deal, I need to win it first. That's not my problem, Ashar grumbled. My presence and that of my people puts a target on you. There are a lot of folks out there who would gladly glass the whole continent for a chance to take me out. I tried to be reasonable. Trust in this if nothing else. You're too useful to simply forget. You left me here for 4,000 years, Ashar snapped. From my point of view, only a few years passes since our last meeting. You weren't the only one on ice for all those millennia. I wasn't frozen. I was offline. Do you know what that feels like? I was nothing. I'll make up to you. Once the war is over, I'll build you a whole modern reactor complex. Planetary shield. Garrison to ensure no one comes in to shoot you up. I promised. Really? You saved my life for a second time. I owe you and I pay my debts. I'll believe it when I see it. No more healing without a bunch of big powerful generators hooked up to me. You hear, Mr. Ashar exclaimed. We've got a deal. I smiled. We already have one. She huffed. Who the criff programmed her with the personality of a teenager anyway? =RK=. You're insane. T muttered. Am I? I thought at her. I saw what you believe you remember. It could have been a simulation. Or old-fashioned insanity. Even without your out-of-this-dimension delusions, you're still crazy. The Jedi rambled. You know, I merely see the world in an alternative ways. Whoever decided what's sane? I shot back. Most of the galaxy. That isn't a valid argument. I intoned and strapped myself in a seat. T simply wouldn't shut up once our situation sunk in. It was already becoming irritating. It was a good thing I had a very long time to practice ignoring voices in my head, real or otherwise. We're good to go. I called the pilot of the assault shuttle which came down to bring me back to the Freedom. The ramp closed and we got in the air a few seconds later. What was that? I wasn't paying attention. I inquired. Damn you, T snapped. I continued to tune out the Jedi on our way back. A shower and a fast snack later, I was meeting my top commanders, the nearest conference room complete with a proper holo projector. You certainly look better, Joanna proclaimed after examining me for a few seconds. Being physically 35 or so again is much better. I nodded in agreement. We've got some decisions to make. I sat down and used the Force to activate the holoprojector. A detailed map of the galaxy appeared between us. Wilhuff, you'll be glad to note we'll be stopping at Iriadu. We're leaving our most damaged ships with your brother there. Where do you think you'll do more good, back home or with us and eventually at Coruscant? Tarkin frowned. Gideon has things in hand, or so you say, General. Once we'll assess the situation I'll make my final decision, but I think I'll be more useful at Coruscant. Good to know. I'm bumping you up to Rear Admiral in the Republic Navy pending confirmation from HQ once we're in contact with the capital. You'll act as Admiral Holt's XO for the fleet. Recommendations? You know I would like us to strike for Mandalore, though getting there would be almost as hard as reaching Coruscant. I appreciate it, General. Tarkin smiled with satisfaction. From Iriadu we should strike either towards Naboo or Malastur, whichever world still holds, Joanna suggested. Then it gets tricky. We might be better off blitzing through the central sectors controlled by the Separatists. They shouldn't have powerful garrisons there. After that, skirt through Dalang, take a jaunt through Hutt space, then fight our way to the eastern quadrant. I examined the map. Rongdon is a central cis hub. Probably heavily defended, however. From there we have a straight flight to Kashyyyk. That leaves us within 1 or 2 jumps from friendly space if the Navy hasn't pulled back deeper from the rim, Tarkin pointed out. It's better chance than trying to get to the core directly. The Separatists would be concentrating as much hardware as they could between Kuwait, Corellia, and Fondor. Joanna added. While I want to go home, a direct dash for the core won't serve us well. We'll go to Naboo if it still holds. It's one of the naval staging grounds under Op Plan Red. Then we'll decide for sure on our next step. I want preliminary strike plans for Kalaba, Nukov, and Mylago. We'll either wreck everything we could or run as fast as we can depending on the enemy resistance we meet. Use the best estimates based on our most recent intelligence. We'll update the plans if we got new intel at Iriadu or Naboo. You know we might not be able to break through the Confederation's central sectors, right? Joanna asked. The alternative is that we were stuck here in the Western Quadrant until the war is decided one way or another. We're cut off from Coruscant and the bulk of our industry. However, we've still got a powerful fleet and the Confederacy is going to be scrambling to digest its new gains and reinforce the line at the core. We're a target anyway. It was a miracle we got here without a major battle after Camino. We won't be so lucky again. You call that luck? T exclaimed and continued to fume and mutter when I ignored her. We won't win this war while on the defense. Tarkin inclined his head. We can keep the enemy off balance. Force them to spend resource chasing them. There are many smaller forces who are supposed to avoid contact until either reinforced or an opportunity presents itself so they could strike. There are significant reinforcements we could link up with in a lot of the sectors we'll be passing through. Good point. My attention returned to the map and I smiled. The Confederacy controlled most of the galaxy at the moment. That meant they were stretched rather thin outside of the front lines and strategically important locations. They would be moving whatever reserves they've got into striking distance of the core or into the galactic east. My biggest problem was the fleet we fled from at Camino. Facing it whole would mean likely a mutually assured destruction. However, short from such a concentration of firepower, we could win multiple engagements before being ground down to nothing. Linking up with a few laying low battle groups would be quite useful. Picking up potential reinforcements from Naboo would be even better. I'll get the fleet moving towards Iriadu if that's all, Joanna asked. Please do so, Admiral. =RK equals Republic R&D Complex. Location classified. Are we all here? Valentra asked. Tilar was sitting next to Kenobi at a large round table deep-withing the premier military R&D facility on Coruscant. They were here to meet a large group of analysts and engineers who were busy analyzing the various battles fought since the war began. They would be presenting their conclusions about the efficiency of various weapon systems, tactics, and giving recommendations for upgrades to both the Army and Navy. "We're all accounted for, sir," Commander Adar Talon confirmed. He was the officer in charge of designing a viable replacement to the current small craft in the face of Guardian and Umbrella systems. He was also the highest-ranked officer among the scientist and analyst contingent and nominally in charge of them. "Let's begin then. What's first on the agenda?" Obi-Wan opened the meeting. "Capital ship performance," Talon began. "After going over all available data, we can confirm Admirals Yularen and Coburn conclusions. While our cruisers could still be overwhelmed by superior numbers, in any major engagement our forces will be at a significant advantage when facing lighter separatist ships. When our cruiser can rotate in and out of the line of fire, the numbers of munificent frigates needed to overwhelm a single Venator raises sharply from 6 or 7 to at least 15. If they survive long enough to overwhelm her shields. That's better than expected. What about a larger number of even lighter ships?" Valentra asked. "Only in overwhelming numbers. Concentrating fire at a maneuvering ship with proper support isn't exactly easy, and lighter ships are even easier to kill. However, a viable tactic we observed used by both sides is exiting hyperspace in close proximity to enemy ships and overwhelming them with concentrated firepower. Such maneuvers are most useful against isolated or small groups of ships. Using similar tactics, large number of fighters or missile-armed ships could still prove dangerous to cruisers equipped with the basic Guardian system. Our Block 2 upgrade for Venotors, Victory Star destroyers and Acclamators would make them much less vulnerable to such attacks at anything but point-blank range. Unfortunately, the same isn't true for the Block I system. Trials and limited real combat testing at Kuwait shows that ships purposefully built with Guardian from the ground up are at least an order of magnitude more effective against small craft and missile strikes. The people who gave us the Guardian could name any price they wish, especially if they could improve it even further." Valentra nodded in approval. "Recommendations for disrupting pinpoint hyperspace attacks? Attach number of interdictors to each fleet. We've got designers working on a light cruiser variant equipped as both interdictor and PD platform." "Noted. We'll get back to them later." "Further recommendations?" Obi-Wan asked. "Increase funding to the Shield Development Department. They've got some fascinating theoretical work on making spaceship ray shielding useful while the deflectors are at full power. As we all know, the particle shields are usually much weaker and can't be powered at more than 10% without interfering with the deflector fields. New theoretical work suggests that it might be possible to bring them up to 50% without major interference. That would make bomber-mounted proton torpedoes a non-factor as longer as the shield holds." "Granted." Valentra leaned forward. "Why am I hearing of this just now?" Talon looked uncomfortable. "It appears that the department leader isn't exactly popular around here." The commander winced. "Office politics?" Tilar sneered. "Are you telling me that a potential game-changer in space warfare wasn't pursued aggressively because someone dislikes the people who came up with the idea? Was the same true for the Guardian?" "I've seen the specs. We should have had similar system installed long before the war began." "More or less." Valentra let out a quiet string of vile curses. "Once we're done here I'll be talking with the director. He better have good answers." Tilar seethed. "Small craft. What do you recommend? Our losses are becoming unsustainable considering their lack of effectiveness." "We're examining an idea by General Vale as well as a preliminary design he submitted before he left to deal with Crimson." Talon pressed a few buttons and a hollow image of a red craft appeared over the table. "This is the first potential prototype of Project Dragon Wing. X-311 Dragon. This is a mobile armor concept, spec'd for anti-ship strikes." "What is the MPE cannon?" Obi-Wan asked after examining the Dragon's primary weapon and its designation. "Something Project Antares is working on." Talon smiled. "Multi-phase energy cannon. Directed antimatter weaponry. Antimatter hasn't been used in a very long time." Valentra frowned. "Do you know why, sir?" The commander's smile grew wider. "Containment. When the containment system is taken into account, antimatter weaponry doesn't have bigger effective payload than other more conventional warheads, which are safer to use too, Tula recalled. That actually hasn't been the case for some time, however no one seems to have been interested in doing more research into antimatter. Antares. How far along is that project? Kenobi asked. We'll have viable missile warheads ready for testing within the month. A useful storage system for something like the X-311 should ready within 2 to 3 months. Larger variants for mounting on capital ships will actually be ready for testing sooner. About 6 weeks if there aren't complications. If Antares prove viable, it's going to strain our logistics even further if we implement its fruits. Valentra grumbled. He would be the one tasked with figuring out how to do it in the first place. Upgrading ships, building antimatter factories, the logistics of it all. How would antimatter cannons compare to capital ship-sized turbo-lasers? Certainly more powerful against armor. We'll have to actually test them against deflectors. See it done and get back to me ASAP. Interlude, Pef's Continuing Misadventures. =RK=. Author, Pef from the Space Battles forums. This update's posted with his permission. In hyperspace, en route to Nashada. ETA 55 days. Finally, I had learned all the Jedi code. Though, I liked my own variant better. There is no death, there is the Force? Really? Death was programmed in all living beings. Even if the biology of this galaxy was slightly different, infusing every living being with the Force, death was still part of the natural cycle. Death, yet the Force. This made more sense. There is death, there is also the Force. And from my memories, I knew even this wasn't an absolute. Force ghosts, sentient holocrons, uploading memories into clones, whatever else the Sith knew. Death wasn't absolute, and could be delayed or even avoided with the Force. And if the Force could promote regeneration, this was the ultimate step in telekinesis. Biokinesis. I had memories of powerful biokinetics, from my readings. I knew what biokinesis actually meant. I will have to buy a few droids as well, and test some things. Some of those droids seemed almost sapient. Perhaps some part of their matrix was blocked or censored, limiting their ability to think for themselves, but humor was certainly an attribute of sapience. It was the only redeeming quality of the Jedi, as well. They programmed themselves, from a young age, to avoid emotions, to fear the dark side. But fear was also an emotion. It was no wonder they tended to go homicidal, even genocidal, when they encountered these so-called dark side users. I opened my eyes to check on the girls. Swan was also busy meditating, having found some kind of enlightenment in my own version of the code. Clarice was busy studying everything about ships. Her cooking was still horrible though. Close my eyes again. Lifting things was still impossible. It had to be some kind of mental block. Action at a distance. Yeah, it appeared impossible, but I knew I could do it, at small scales. Shifting electron orbits to transmute elements in drugs. Reading surface thoughts and emotions. Clairvoyance, precognition. All were action at a distance. So why not simple telekinesis? Every Jedi had some mastery over it. Every Sith as well. But not me. Was this my special brand of the Force? Did I even need telekinesis? Accelerating at full speed, I could snap the neck of most races, just with my own hands. And my original mantra, where did it come from? Why those lines? They were not in the Jedi code. Perhaps a variant of the old saying? May the Force be with you? But the part about strength, and being set free? I might need a Sith teacher too. Maybe there'll be a Sith slave on Nashada. Not likely though. I wasn't that lucky. Plus keeping peace on my ship would be horrendous. The lizard jumped from the tree and into my lap. Pet, avoid the bite. Samiri are weird. I looked up, counting the leaves. Not enough, not for 55 days. Time to experiment again. I walked silently behind the Jedi, and placed the reptile in her lap. What the hell? Damn Samir. What is it? She yelled, coming out of her trance with the reflex to draw a weapon from her belt. She stared at the steel knife, then at the lizard, in her other hand. The Vong don't have the Force. They don't use mechanical tech either. And their armor can block lightsabers, I explained, petting the lizard one last time. Back to the madness. The girls looked at me strangely. Whatever. Let's see. Detergent, water, bantha milk, sugar. I carried a bunch of containers next to the Olbio tree, then began mixing a fertilizer. Agri-Corps Jedi must use similar techniques to feed an entire galaxy. Famine was coming too. Maybe someone will countermand Order 66 before that happened, or the Vong will have an easy time in this galaxy. Or maybe I will have to fool droids? Was there anyone able to change contingencies now? Never mind. My tree first. Mix, stir, use the force. Then again. I poured the solution in a large crate with some soil and the roots, then again went for the skill sheet. Operator, plant growing skill please, I demanded, then placed a hand on the bark, and let the force do its thing. No, less roots, more leaves. Like that. Now more leaves. More. Griff, plant biokinesis was hard work. I felt tired, from just one tree. You know, Jedi and Agri-Corps need a month to grow tree like that. And they stick their fingers into the ground. The actual Jedi explained, marveling at my work. They'll be dead soon. The famine will be pretty nasty though, I answered instead. Why are you worried about these Vong? Most of everyone doesn't use the Force, Clarice asked, having seen something in my words, or maybe in my memories. Who knows how much of our minds touched, while in trance. The Vong are an extragalactic race, which have begun invading our galaxy. Biotechnology, way more advanced than ours. Probably on par with the Hutts. And they don't have the Force, unlike living things in our galaxy. Which means Jedi can't sense or predict them. I told them, pointing at the Zamia. They stared at the lizard then exclaimed in concert, Griff. Griff indeed. Wait, the Hutts? The slimy slugs? They barely have flush toilets, Swan argued, having seen them up close. And yet, in my visions, they were able to resist the Vong on their own, even stopping the bioforming of their planets, I argued. Again throwing the burden on a higher force. You can't see the Vong, but you can see where they would attack. Swan muttered, looking at me strangely. Something like that. Precognition isn't an exact science. They have already begun attacking planets in the west. Chiss Ascendancy should have more hard data. I mused, taking the Zamia back, and placing it back in its tree. It didn't try to bite this time. Progress. What else then? If lightsabers won't work. Not that there will be many Jedi left. Blasters will work even less. Hunter droids, electrical pulses, sonic weapons, explosives, mass turbo lasers, railguns, bioweapons. Problem is, in space, no one can hear you scream. No medium to transfer electricity or sound. Explosives can be intercepted. Projectiles too. And biotech is self-healing. Clarice expanded on my premise. Clever girl. We should tell someone. Everyone. This separatist war is pointless, Swan said, very calmly. Damn, her ability to control her emotions was extraordinary. Well, Palpatine knew. This is the point of this war. Militarization, I hummed, closing my eyes and falling asleep. She looked at her apprentice with new eyes again. Strangest savior in the galaxy, and just barely sane. Probably half Sith by now, judging by how he persuaded his childhood friend to follow him. And practicing a dozen forbidden techniques, without even knowing. Some of his abilities were off the scale, his force speed and force sight primarily. Other were clearly unknown or untrained, with telekinesis being simply not possible for him. The girl was involved somehow in that corporate program, but claimed only to have kept an eye on the boy. Who knows how many kids were lost to mad scientists trying to obtain control over the Force. And even more, the boy seemed able to predict hyperspace routes. Like the fabled explorers over the millennia, the Force was clearly aiding him, or maybe he was doing the will of the Force? That code he made up, it felt more true than a code that had guided the Jedi Order for a millennium. And then failed. Emotion yet peace. To think that 3 words would change her life around. She could feel, and still hold the light. The Jedi of old were rumored to have wives, and Master Kenobi took a wife too. Skywalker, the so-called Chosen One, also had a wife. Both were excluded from the Order for that, but the Jedi were no more. When her own contingent of clones turned their weapons, and she felt her comrades dying all over the galaxy, she was just crushed, didn't even resist being taken prisoner. Then the clones attacked some other planet and lost, and the scummy scumbags found a broken Jedi to torture, forgotten and chained up in a cell. Then sold her to another group. Then again, to that slimy hut. The Zarmia saved her too. She would have gone mad as well, if she could sense the Force on Dandoran. She, who aced her trials and survived the pit at Geonosis. Broken by slavers and smugglers. The boy thought she was a virgin. What a joke. Like those slimes would respect Jedi diplomatic immunity. Just a day more, and she would have fallen, burning their brains and their ships. Maybe she already did. The code was gone. Maybe this boy will save her for real. If she could teach him to stay sane. Maybe he will be the husband she was looking for. In hyperspace, en route to Nashada, ETA 45 days, I finally achieved calm, for the first time in almost a month. As foolish as Jedi were, their breathing and meditation work. And I think I realized what the mantra I was given means. My main power is healing. My strength is my own. Just like a gaming class, my powers are focused on reinforcing the self. Once I master the ability, I will possibly be ageless and live indefinitely. My strength, my speed, my healing, all part of a perk tree, just like in those games I played in another life. A monk. The universe had a sense of humor after all. While meditating, I could sense my other selves, idling somewhere in a room, in the back of my mind. And just as I suspected, some of them were nasty beasts. Others were tricksters or lovers, healers and scientists. My own subconscious, divided and segregated by my own inclinations. A galactic senate, in my psyche, ruling by consensus. It was a wonder I was not paralyzed. I had to establish a common agenda, where everyone will work together. Stay away from the civil war. Warn the other galactic players of the incoming threat. Recruit my own Force users, and arm them with effective weapons. And get rich doing it. Get more wives. A bit of mix and match, with all these impulses tugging at my brain. Eat more races, experience everything. I will have to draw some lines, limit myself to not go overboard. Limit mind rape to enemies? But what if I could save millions of slaves by bending a hut and make him let them go? Decisions. The huts were a key player as well. Rich beyond measure, and powerful. Zul wasn't exactly what I needed though. If even one of my memories was correct, he was playing with an undead plague. Or maybe it was exactly what I needed. An undead army to fight the Vong? Necromancer mechanics would work in my favor then. With every death, my army would grow. Okay, I postponed this long enough. Time to find out what is in the cage. I rose and dragged the cage, and once I left the Lamir range it became much lighter. So, it was this heavy, I just compensated with the Force. It seems there is no lock or door to the secret compartment. The whole lower plate of the cage was possibly cast around the container inside 2 layers, a durasteel layer above, and something heavier inside. And with Zarmir on top, not even a Sith would be able to detect the compartment. Very clever. Now, the question was, should I tamper with it? Opening the mail was taboo for couriers, for a good reason. The huts would hunt down those that didn't respect their contracts. Still. My pad only mentioned the Zarmia sapling. A contraction of terms, somehow including both the tree and the lizard. Nothing about the cage though. Guess former couriers were expected to collect leaves and feed the Lamir through the grating. I had to fulfill the delivery now that I've taken it. The hut mentioned a hunt. And it was probably a bounty. A few inner selves lit up in excitement, trembling with anticipation of a good fight and more delicious morsels to be tasted, once we won. Clam down, will you? I've seen that bounty hunter kill Jedi like rabbits. Some hunters were way too dangerous. Victory was staying alive, and not fighting at all. For all I knew, it could be a Sith talisman inside, corrupting everything and turning anyone in range into undead auric ghouls. Some victories were too expensive to win. Found anything, Pef? My teacher asked, opening an eye to examine me. More mystery. Whatever is inside is probably dangerous, and covered with a force-absorbing material. Then a heavy layer was poured around it, possibly cortosis, then another layer of durasteel. Just the cage is worth a frigate or even a cruiser, I explained, dragging the cage back into the shade of the tree. And with its Zarmir inside, nobody could sense anything. We should get rid of it. Throw the cage into a sun, Swan argued, eyeing the cage with a bit of fear. Yeah, no. This was a quest item. And considering the whole life in the galaxy was at stake, I wasn't about to destroy it, just out of fear. Fear is the mind killer. I needed common sense and logic, not unfounded fears. Even an undead plague could be turned against the Vong. The cage stays. The Force doesn't play around. It lead me to it for a reason. I decided, swiping 2 fingers in front of her face. She tilted her head, trying to discern my meaning, but I was just inside the Lamia range. Come, let's walk through the forms again, she demanded, pointing at the ghillie suit I made out of leaves. I draped it over my armor, while she also wore hers. A bit of photosynthesis alchemy, and tinkering with 2 lanterns, and we had the equivalent of lightsabers, projecting a tight beam of both green light and ultraviolet. The leaves would change color to red, if ultraviolet touched them. Form I, also known as Shicho. Basic moves, often rudimentary, but also the last line of defense, if any others failed. Form I had no weakness. Strength and speed, straight lines. Much like fencing, back at home I matched speed with my teacher, and began my velocities. A series of kata, starting slow, to heat up muscles and ligaments, then accelerating constantly to your maximum speed. At my maximum speed though, my teacher remained frozen in time. So, 10% speed then. We mimed our beams hitting each other and rebounding, which put a bit of strain on my arms. And I just let the Force take over, watching and learning. Like a passenger in my own body, I just focused on maintaining my body, repairing muscles and nerves, regulating my breathing, scanning the room for dangers. My hands could fight on their own. After 6 hours, my reserves started to deplete, and I would have to start burning whatever fat I had left. Swan was also tired, but she was used to this. I accelerated to 30%, painting all her suit red in a second. And stop. Okay. It appears you learned Form I already. Or possibly stole the knowledge from me. Hard to say, with you. Swan complained, flowing into a kneeling stance. I knelt in front of her, and closed my eyes. Probably stolen. Learning a form takes years. Then again, my other memories had me practicing fencing, from a young age. I quit a few years later, when I realized my fencing teacher used his left hand, and I learned to fence with my left too, trying to copy his moves. Only my dominant hand was my right one. I tried for a few months to learn everything over, with my right hand, but it just wasn't the same. I was too slow. Swan wore a pair of shorts, and the scar marred her perfect thigh. It bothered me for some reason. The Force could heal anything. It could regrow limbs, if used correctly. I removed my glove, and placed my hand on her scar. The body wanted to heal, but Swan kept the scar, with the Force. Mental problem then. Guilt, possibly. I examined the rest. Oh boy. They sure did a number on her. Not a virgin after all, Swan said in a whisper. Shame in her aura. Like it was her fault. I can grow the damn thing back, if it matters to you. It will just be more painful first time you make love, I mused, repairing internal scarring and cysts, restoring blood flow to shriveled organs, and growing back the chastity. I went on with the rest of her body, repairing years of neglect. She kinda abused this body to its limit. An hour later, I patted her perfect thigh, now devoid of a scar. I feel 10 years younger, Swan exclaimed, raising and sketching a few moves, a bit faster than before. Shower is free. And you are 10 years younger. Welcome to Teenage Club, Miss Swan, I answered, taking off the ghillie suit and going back under the tree. Too much force for today. Now I needed peace. The Lamia jumped down from the tree and coiled on my chest. Damn lizard. You're not a wife. In hyperspace, en route to Nashada. ETA 40 days. The last of Zabrak meat is gone. 3 young people eat a lot of meat, and this last stew was even marginally tasty. Who knew adding albio leaves to a stew could change the taste so much? I have started learning Form 2, or Makoshi. It is very very hard. Swan is much better at Sorisu and Ataru, which kinda explains her survival at Geonosis. I think I will never be a finesse duelist like Dooku. But learning a form also lets you learn the weakness. And Makoshi is vulnerable to pure speed. Well, everything is, But Mikoshi was made to counter strength, to redirect blows and counterattack. Looks similar to a Japanese style from my other life. Like Aikido, with swords. One more day of making a fool of myself, then we start on Form 3. Clarice is studying sublight engines now. Perhaps one day, we will have faster ships because of it. It's strange how ship speeds work in this universe. Slow ships like shuttles make about 40 lph, while superfast fighters like X-Wings make 100 lph. My Corvette will attain 80 lph, with cruiser-class engines, barely 20% lower than the fastest ships in the galaxy. And capital ships slug about at 60 lph. Can you see now why this is frustrating? A carrier that moves at 0.6 Mach, while its fighters fly at 1 Mach? Sure, everything is in vacuum, so there's little friction if any, but mass shouldn't matter so little. This makes carrier task forces much less effective than back in my memories. I scratch the carrier design and focus on a missile cruiser. More Dakar is always welcome. Let's see, cruiser power plant, sublight engines, hyperdrives 1.0. But a long shape would stagger missile launches and impacts. I needed a wing shape, like the B-2 bomber. Change the orientation, 400 meters wide and 100 meters long. 40 torpedo tubes and 200 missile launchers on top, spread out along the wing. Add a top turret and 20 flak batteries to defend the ship after the payload was launched. 2,000 missiles and 40 torpedoes. Pretty much fire, then run. One ship could take down an entire wave of vulture droids. And even star destroyers would have to be careful of a couple missile cruisers dropping out of hyperspace near them. I could add a pair of secondary hyperdrives, Mark 12. Just to flit about the battlefield with small tactical jumps. Best defense is to not be there when the firepower arrives. Power output at 113%. Damn it. But I still had volume left inside the ship. 2 small generators, one for each tactical hyperdrive. Power at 97%. Huh? Damn hyperdrives are power hogs. Still, 70 lph should be enough for a cruiser. And save. Project Hummingbird. What ship is that? You made another one? I heard Clarice wonder, peeking over my head. Missile cruiser. The idea is to have all launchers fire at once, and overwhelm defenses, I explained, basking in her loving aura. They won't survive long. They'll be priority targets for capital ships, Clarice argued, as this was very much her business. Thus, backup hyperdrives, for tactical jumps. Drop on top of the battleship, fire the torpedoes, then jump away on another hyperdrive. What do you think? 40 capital class torpedoes, at point blank. How did you fit so many on a cruiser? Well, torpedoes are 50 meters long. And the ship is 100 meters wide. One torpedo launcher every 10 meters. You just need to get close enough, then release. Torpedoes have their own engine after all. I replied with a shrug. Maybe we can add some load-bearing pylons, and double the capacity. A Lucrehuk would survive 40 torpedoes, Clarice said, calculating shield emitters and armor integrity on her own pad. They would? Damn, this galaxy's capital ships were way too tough. But, would they survive 100 torpedoes? A ship had 2 sides in space. I'll need to leave corridors for the regular missiles to pass, but I could add some pylons on top as well. 20 more torpedoes on top, and 40 hanging below. And pray no stray shot hits a warhead. That will make a pretty explosion. Could you outfit torpedoes with their own shield emitters? Droideka had shields. Back to the drawing board then. Man, constructing effective ships in this universe was still hard. Swan tiptoed next to me as well, curious about what I was doing. Never mind. Open a torpedo design, find room for an emitter, pack it back. Should resist a few fighter laser shots. Now back to the Hummingbird. Pylons for torpedoes, then 60 more torpedoes. Warnings, the top missile launchers couldn't acquire targets now. Okay, never mind the top pylons then. 20 pylons below, each carrying 2 torpedoes. Align the intervals so exhaust wouldn't get in the way. Now it looked like a fighter bomber from my old universe. Whatever. Don't mess with it, if it works. And save. It looks ugly. Like a bird of prey, coming back from hunting, Swan said, barely in a whisper. Bird of prey, eh? It certainly is. One of them should be able to one-shot a battleship. Right, Clarice? I asked back, as Clarice was finishing her calculations. If they all hit at once. Then yes. Even if only 60 hit at once. You added droidica shields to the torpedoes? She wondered, like nobody else has thought of it before. Yeah. Less chance of a stray shot blowing up the ship. And more torpedoes will survive point defense fire, I explained proudly. Wouldn't it be safer to simply double-deck the ship and protect the torpedoes with armor and cruiser shields? Swan asked innocently. Clarice and I looked at each other and face-palmed in synchron. Welcome to the Bird of Prey Corporation, Miss Swan. Your actions today may have saved millions of lives, I proclaimed dramatically, opening my arms wide for a hug. Clarice jumped to my chest at once, while Swan took her time, testing the waters. Still, we were family now. And Swan seemed a little excited too. Young body with raging hormones. She was a teenager now, physically. Also, newly made virgin. Don't rush into things, Swan. We have all the time in the world, I muttered, and she hugged me harder. This felt peaceful too. Emotion yet peace. Wasn't so hard. In hyperspace, en route to Nashada. ETA 35 days. Form 3 is amazing. Every single breath, every single step, designed to keep your body safe. It was why I started learning fencing, back when I was a kid. I went to the cinema, got mind blown by the floating lightsabers, then rushed home and demanded I had to learn it too. What I got was a smelly metal helmet, and a thin steel sword. And grueling hours of running and jumping stairs. Now I was back to that, in a metal helmet, and a heavy metal armor, and a pretend lightsaber. If it wasn't for the actual Jedi teaching me, I might as well stayed home. But a good teacher made all the difference. Well, that, and the Force. Without Force reinforcement and a touch of short-range precognition, your saber will never block a blast or bolt. Bolts were slower than bullets, but without enhanced reflexes you'd be just as dead. The first velocities were somewhat similar to Tai Chi but at higher speeds, 360 degrees defense, almost perfect. And if I accelerated at 50% speed, I could take on a division of droids by myself. This was the truth of Star Wars universe. A Force user was just that good, once one learned the correct way. So now, I try to do same thing, still in my too heavy armor. But with a lizard coiled around my neck. Without the Force, Sorisu is torture. Every single step hurts. Every block reverberates my muscles and bones, since Swan is throwing soup cans at me, at almost escape velocity. I will not break. Is this what the mantra means? One last dodge, and the next soup can hits my helmet and knocks me to the floor. The Zamir smartly leaps away, and climbs its tree before I reach the floor. How can it move so fast, without the Force? Or maybe not. It projects an anti-force field, but the lizard itself is alive. It should contain Force cells, or midi-chlorians or whatever else makes this Force tick. I know it can sense predators, so the lizard is also Force sensitive. It must have a trick, to be invisible in the Force, and still use it. I lowered myself just at margin of its influence, and poked a hand inside. Let's see. Internally, the Force still flowed, but outside the skin, every single perception was cut off. Like placing a hand in a bowl of cold water. Numb and dull. What did you discover now, my apprentice? Swan asked, kneeling next to me. Hand inside the Zamir field, and see, I said instead. Better not ruin her own intuition with my simple mind. We searched and tested for half an hour, trying to find a workaround. The Force still flowed inside my hand. So, theoretically, I could reinforce it, flowing along bones and veins, just keep my Force senses contained inside. Ouch. 1 centimeter, and my nerves exploded in pain. 1 more centimeter, and I felt my blood boil. Pain is weakness leaving my body. Again. 1 more centimeter, blackness. I woke up some time later, both girls fusing above me. Idiot, you almost cauterized off your hand, Swan yelled at me, with true worry in her aura. I lifted said hand and observed it with the Force. Necrosis. Tissue degeneration. Nerves burned. Blood vessels ruptured. I was missing something again. Operator, Zarmir countermeasures please, I asked in my mind, opening myself to the Force. Oh. I was going about it the exact wrong way. You had to wrap yourself in the field, not push through it. I pushed some force into my burned hand, and lightning sparked between my fingers. Is this how you gained Force lightning? Look, Swan. Electricity, I exclaimed proudly. At least it's not red. Blue lighting is possible for Jedi too. My teacher replied, with a sigh of defeat. I think I can change colors too. Let's see, red is rage, violet is hate. I mused, sparking different personalities on different fingers. I give up. Sleep and heal for now. And no more Zarmir for a few days. Don't want to lose my first apprentice, Swan said, wiping sweat from under her eyes. Maybe not sweat. Clarice climbed in bed next to me and I drifted into a hazy dream. More visions. I wish there was a way to remember them. In hyperspace, en route to Nashada, ETA 30 days. I woke up next to a naked Clarice again. Damn it. Why was I missing all the fun? At least my hand grew back. Cyborg hands would be creepy. Clarice had a somewhat larger chest now. Did my Luda personality mess with it? I counted rapidly all the biokinetics on the ship. Divide by 0. The lizard had to have done it. That's my answer and I'll stick to it. Not like it could defend itself in court. Yes, Your Honor. The suspect is known to manifest unknown and strange force powers. Perhaps it wanted to be breastfed. Who knows how aliens think? I argued with the Inquisitor. Same thing could be said about yourself. Boys are known to adore large chests, the Inquisitor argued logically. Objection, Your Honor. Everyone loves large chests, I proclaimed triumphantly in my mind. The Inquisitor blushed, and looked down at her quite flat chest. Perhaps I should commute the sentence to community service. There are some other citizens who would want larger chests. The Inquisitor mused, her face strangely similar to my teacher's. Pef, my love. This is wonderful. Thank you so much, Clarice exclaimed, after waking up and noticing the upgrades. I petted the upgrades with appreciation. Whoever did it, he surely knew what I liked. Pef, time to train. My teacher yelled, bursting in my room. Sure thing, Swan. Let me know if you want upgrades too, I replied at once, juggling the upgrades with my palms. We'll talk about it in private. I have to go cool down. I mean warm up, Swan muttered, turning red and almost running outside. Don't make so much fun of the poor Jedi. I bet she never had a boyfriend, Clarice chided me, a tinge of concern in her aura. You know I'll have to get a dozen wives, right? You know how Skywalker went AWOL and crashed his fleet at Second Geonosis. Just one wife is too dangerous for powerful Force users. We go mad and burn entire worlds, I whispered in her ear, while petting her harder. Oh. Didn't realize, did you just propose to me? While telling me you're getting a dozen more wives? Clarice complained, between kisses. You'll always be my first. And imagine how much credits I'll get from your parents as dowry. I argued, lifting her and flash-stepping both of us in the shower. Swan was also in the shower, busy warming herself up. Oh well, go with the flow. So, want some? I asked politely. Clarice had always thought she was the center of the galaxy. Everyone told her, and she believed it. Until a cute boy from her class punched her in the face. The universe changed then. The boy, called Pef, by his pair of poor and barely civilized parents, became the center of the universe. She noticed how he always knew the answer to any question. How he always won every fight, no matter how many bullies ganged on him. Sure, he once received a fork in his neck from that bitch Alessia, but she was taken away and never seen after. And when high school started, she learned the truth. She was to be the boy's handler. He was a precious experiment, drugged and tested to become the sector's secret weapon. A genius and a Force user, but not corrupted by the stupid Jedi. A number of corporations cooperated on this project, and only the boy remained sane. All the others, including Alessia, went mad. It wasn't known why, but a special drug obtained at enormous costs from somewhere in Hutt space kept the boy sane. Lack of drugs made him give in to impulses and beat up anyone who looked at him funny. Which was everyone. Not a good idea. She used her Kuwait connections to stay close and monitor him, until that day, when some high-ranking officers in GAR decided it was time to build their own empire, right in the corporate sector. Feeling, learning to cook and clean, learning about ship systems. She did everything Pef asked, because she was too much in love to care. And that story ended today, with Pef and his new wives sharing a shower. You better treat both of us equal. And anyway, I loved you first, Clarice told her husband with a stern voice. One more round? He asked, confused. Damn him and his oblivious ways. The rich girl is spent. I can go on for hours more, Swan interfered, stealing her husband for another ride. Damn her. She was a Jedi too. Anyway, Pef said she will always be the first. So what if she couldn't regenerate with the Force? Her love will last forever. Building the future. =RK=. Part 1. Tarkin Family Estate. Eriadu. Tarkin's home was impressive. Not just because it demonstrated the clan's wealth, which it certainly did. The large complex, because that's what it was tasteful. From the architecture, it had a severe, yet majestic feel to it which simply fit into the region where it was laid out, to the various decorations. They were tasteful. The various rooms and corridors' own decorations fit seamlessly. There weren't occasions where you would suddenly pass through a door and wonder if you got thrown somewhere else. The various wings of the estate showcased different styles. From the core-centric of the West, complete with pieces ranging from the best from Coruscant to Alderaan, Corellian and quasi-priceless pieces of art to the better parts of notable mid and outer rim decorations and art respectively in the east and south wings. The north wing, which is where most of the family actually worked and lived when home, was pure Eriadu, which was a pointed statement to all visitors. We were currently sitting on a large domed balcony overlooking a bay around which the estate was built. Below us stormy waves were clashing into jagged cliffs hiding a secluded beach. Gideon cheerfully pointed out that this was one of handful places on the planet you could actually swim in the ocean without fearing for your health. The systems keeping it that way in private from the local paparazzi cost a small fortune by themselves. Acid rain sizzled over the dome and shields keeping both beach and estate alike safe from the polluted environment on Eriadu. Forked lighting tore through dark clouds chock full by industrial pollution and all the shite thrown in the air during the Cis invasion. It was dark and stormy night. Perfect for plotting what many might consider treason. Very stereotypical too, something that T wouldn't shut up about. On the other hand, we were all sitting in comfortable armchairs, sipping the best drinks Tarkin's cellar could produce. The balcony was quite well lit too, so we weren't sitting in the shadows like stereotypical villains from the newest holodrama. Altogether there were 3 members of the Tarkin family in the meeting. Gideon sat to my left, with his elder brother Wilhuff and his wife Thalassa, née Motti. Learning that my minion wasn't just married before ending up at Camino, but to whom, was a very pleasant surprise. Thalassa was a tall, beautiful woman with rich long brown hair and expressive dark eyes. While the Tarkin family was very powerful here on Eriadu and across the sector, their alliance with the Motti from Falarian was potentially a game-changer, for many reasons. That family controlled the meganite mining on their homeworld, which was a moss of all things. Moss that was very useful for the creation of certain types of military-grade explosives in a relatively cheap way. Between them and their reliable allies, Houses Tarkin and Motti more or less controlled the whole Seswena sector. Getting the latter on board would be critical for even more important reasons, their own familiar connections in the core. The Motti were relatives and allies to House Praji, originally from Caecilius and more recently Coruscant. They were quite powerful in their own right both politically and fiscally. The Praji had large influence with the Bank of the Core on Coruscant, a lot of allies all over the core worlds, and one of their own was the first minister of the Ministry of Ingress for the Republic, which dealt with immigration for the whole Republic and Coruscant in particular, which gave him a lot of both soft and hard power in the government. Then there were the Praji notable allies, among whom were the Drae family. Yes, those Drae as in the Drae Thrust, which controlled Adas Corp, the Vangervalis systems, both of which I knew from back in the day. They were also close allies and major shareholders in the newest installment of the good old Zerka Corporation, Zerka Arms nowadays. Just being allied with the Tarkin family opened a lot of doors. However, they weren't the only people at the table. We were meeting with the CEO of Eriadu Manufacturing, the 4 biggest network executives and representatives from the most important systems in the sector. All told, there were about 30 people on the balcony, and all of them either had deals with Palpy or were at least ready to go support him in his quest for power if it meant a working republic. "You are going to prove the council right," T seethed. "This will undermine the republic. Destroy it." "When I'm done, it will," I thought pointedly at the Jedi Master. Introductions and small talk finally over, it was time to get serious. "My friends, we've all seen where the Republic is headed to. Many of us hoped that Sheev Palpatine would be the man to change that course." Wilhuff began speaking. "When the Trade Federation invaded Naboo, it was a wake-up call for us all." Quiet mutters of affirmation came from the various politicians and CEOs. The Senate debated. It prostrated and did nothing, Gideon continued. "We all saw the writing on the wall. The Republic couldn't be counted on to protect us. That's why all of us gathered together for the first time. Tarkin, Moti, Haro." I tuned him off while busying myself with a mental exercise that silenced T's rambling for the time being. I didn't need the distraction right now. Unfortunately, we didn't prove strong enough. Wilhuff abruptly stood up. "No matter what we did, no matter the valiant defense led by my brother, Iriadu would have fallen if it wasn't for General Vale." Tarkin pointed at me. "Your own homes would have followed sooner rather than later. We weren't saved by the Republic even if most of the forces who came were from the Gar. We were saved by him, by Mandalore of all people. He was the one who in series of battles shattered more than a complete separatist sector fleet. His actions guaranteed our security for long enough so our new construction could come online. That good fortune is of your own making. I merely did what I had to given the situation. It was Gideon who formed the theater fleets. Your combined efforts led to the creation of the ships he led. It was you who trusted him with your navies. And it was Gideon along with your men and women who held the line until we could arrive." I stroked their egos. On my first pass through the region, I should have paid closer attention and asked more questions, because when we got back on Iriadu 2 days ago, there were some pleasant surprises waiting for us. Namely, 30 brand new Venator cruisers fresh from the shipyards, with full escorts giving each a nice little battle group, as well as nearly 100 locally built and designed cruisers with their own attending light ships. Gideon's theater fleets were all up to strength, and he had a powerful fleet which was nominally under Gar control, crewed by volunteers drawn from across the sector and trained in the best available academies, even if those crews were rather green. On the plus side, they were led by a core of veterans drawn from the available pool of survivors from Gar ships which were crippled or destroyed during the battles across the whole quadrant. "You're too gracious, General." Thalassa smiled charmingly at me. "Be as humble as you like, but it wasn't until your arrival that the Republic sector fleet meant to protect us acted. It was your command which allowed the Gar to fight its way to Iriadu. My brother's point stands. You shouldn't have had to do any of that. The Republic should have had enough forces at hand to ensure our security. The fault lies with the Senate on Coruscant. While we support the Republic, fight, die and spent our treasure for her sake, we do recognize when it has failed. Anything less would mean betraying our duties to our own people." "That's true, General." The Oryxian representative, Lyra, hissed. She was a thick, short humanoid feline who resembled a thick-furred puma. The woman sipped her cat's blood, her home world's famous beverage, and smiled at me, displaying an impressive amount of razor-sharp fangs. "I would like to say we support the Republic out of patriotism. While that's even true for some of our people," she waved a clawed paw to encompass everyone on the balcony, "it's not the same for our governments or executive boards. We don't have such luxury. Our relationship with the Republic is a symbiotic one. We pay our taxes, follow the Republic laws, and expect certain concessions in return. Security. Fair and free trade within Republic space. None of that has been true at some degree for centuries. However, it wasn't until the last few decades before the situation slowly began to turn unacceptable. When the war began, the Republic still did more good than harm to us all. If the conflict erupted in just a decade, perhaps two later." ZAS General Director shrugged. "Point well made." I nodded. "While most of you knew Palpatine for longer, I've been talking with him about some of your broad concerns. It won't surprise you to know that many across the Republic share your sentiments." I intoned carefully while using the Force to ensure that anyone looking at me or even a recording of this conversation would conclude I was telling the honest truth. Incidentally, I was using my powers to help me divine what to say for best effect. I was informed that Palpatine intended to do something about it and began laying the groundwork shortly after becoming Chancellor. Even now, more than a decade since he got the post, he had been unable to fix the issues which allowed Naboo to happen. The same issues that saw the Republic defenses deteriorate and be ripe for the taking. If it wasn't for the clone army. I trailed off. I didn't need to say more about the military situation. The clones plugged the gap when the Republic needed it the most. While by themselves they weren't enough to win the war, they ensured it wasn't lost. That's correct. Tarkin the Elder confirmed. At one time or another, Palpatine met with most of us or our representatives. We discussed the state of the Republic, the uselessness of the Senate and how we could change that. Either a reform or a new way. I smiled. A new order which could prove what the Republic promised and consistently failed to deliver: security, justice and prosperity for us all, not just select core worlds. Silence met my words. Senators, CEOs, presidents, monarchs and whatever else they called themselves looked at each other and back at me. Yes. Lyra spoke for them all. Her whiskers twitched in amusement while her fluffy triangular ears pointed my way as if they were sensor clusters. A pair of golden eyes sparkled with curiosity, while they bore into me. Palpatine is gone. The Director General spoke. We're cut off from Coruscant and have no idea what the hell is happening over there. Recent events proved we couldn't strike on our own without years, perhaps decades of industrial development focused to ensure we could produce and maintain sufficient fleets to fend off a major galactic power. For 1,000 years we enjoyed an age of peace. I'm afraid that this war might be simply a herald of things to come. Without Palpatine, even a victorious Republic won't be a guarantee for peace. Unless things change radically, the Senate will continue to be useless, Wilhuff stated grimly. The man was a Palpatine loyalist through and through. The Jedi killing the man who he admired would have made him useful provided I could give him vengeance. After Kamino. Well, let's just say I was glad that I bound him to me. With the Confederacy deploying Jedi of their own in strength, damn you Parian, I couldn't simply dispose of what was left from the Order. Yesterday, Wilhuff begged me to see the Jedi arrested here on Eriadu when Order 66 came. Jedi Master Hiris Welmadoran and a handful of knights had the presence of mind to surrender and were currently in custody. I would be meeting with them tomorrow to decide their fate. Unfortunately for Tarkin, if I could use them relatively safely I would, a thought that almost made T break through my mental defenses so she could continue with her accusations in a way I could hear her. That's why we're here. Gideon took off from where his brother left, while the older Darkin entertained dark thoughts of vengeance. We represent this sectors. We have allies of the same mind in the whole Western Quadrant. He nodded at his sister-in-law. We aren't alone either. House Marty's relatives and allies in the core are of similar mind. While many of them find the existence of the Republic profitable and quite useful, this war changes things. Yesterday a House Paraji courier, Red Swift smuggler, reached my father. We gave you the summary of the situation in the core. Corellia has fallen. The clones in the core are on the brink of mutiny in their zeal to hunt down the Jedi. Without Palpatine the Senate debate. It's been more than 2 weeks since the Chancellor was murdered, yet there still might be no successor elected. There certainly wasn't a new Chancellor before the courier entered the zone cut off from the Holonet a week ago. By now I am sure you all know my past. That I would be unacceptable as a replacement for Palpatine. It's not like I could fill such a great man's shoes if I tried. I smiled disarmingly. However, we need someone who could do the job properly. Someone who with our support and that of our allies might make the Republic work. We need someone who could push for reforms the likes of which no one has seen in 1,000 years, or a person who might make Palpatine's hope for a new order a reality. You have someone acceptable in mind? Wilhuff asked. Obi-Wan Kenobi. I smiled crookedly. An accomplished diplomat and general. Someone who the people of the galaxy could trust without reservation. No matter if we talk about reforms or something more radical, he could be the man to lead us through the inevitable turmoil. He'll need advisors to help him either clean up and streamline the Republic government if it's still salvageable by the end the war is over, or to help him govern if the rot we know it's there has spread too far and we have to look into a new direction. Will he accept? Iriadu Manufacturing's CEO asked after everyone took some time to digest my suggestion. If our proposal is framed in the right light, the Mandalorian people could certainly get behind Kenobi. He's one of our own and I can get enough of our people on board to preempt any fears of new Mandalorian wars, I said. What would you want in exchange? Wilhuff asked. The Mandalorian sector for the Mandalorian people. No discrimination against our culture. I gave them my terms. For me? I want command of the military. Let my accomplishments be my credentials. I'm one of the few people uniquely qualified for the position. You want your old rank back? Wilhuff inquired. As far as I'm concerned, you shouldn't have been forced to step down by the Senate. Ryloth and Second Geonosis are proof enough. The battles you fought across this quadrant, eradicating Crimson. There's one question which must be answered first before we support you and Kenobi without major reservations, General. What really happened on Kamino? Lyra asked. A very good question. I glanced at Wilhuff, who looked sadly at his guests. We were betrayed. Tarkin the Elder began telling the truth.